What's going on? I love this stuff. So we're a little bit early, and what we're going to be talking about today is some super fun stuff. Basically, this is going to be directed at nonfiction authors and talk about how to turn your book into something that's ridiculously profitable fairly quickly. I'm the founder of Author Platform Rocket, and have been doing this kind of stuff for, since roughly 2004. Currently, we're working with about 16,000 authors, and over the space of many years, about 20,000 different entrepreneurs, to help them sort of get their message out there and how to craft these ecosystems that work with things like books and self-publishing and whatnot. And that's really, all I do all day is both in fiction and nonfiction. And one of the biggest problems that I have been seeing, because obviously there's lots of emails and folks coming through Reedsy and whatnot asking a lot of questions, is most people are like, okay, we want to work with a marketer. We have this book, and that's awesome, and that's super cool. The problem is there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it before it's time to market, and most marketers, if they're worth it, won't take on any sort of client who is at this kind of stage simply because it would be highly ineffective. And that is because it's not just about the book. And so I actually have notes here, which is super exciting for everybody. So I can kind of go through this stuff. And I wanted to make sure I kept you on the same place here, because the one thing you have to remember is marketing is not magic. It's a method, it's a methodology. And there's a lot of testing involved in it. And what I want to start you off with is understanding that there must be clarity. There must be clarity in who you're talking to. And so for that, let me tell you who I'm talking to today. When I speak about nonfiction, what I'm not saying is I'm not talking about memoirs or historical accounts or anything quite like that. I'm talking about people who have a business on the back end or the potential for a business on the back end of a book. So that could be anything from real estate to personal development to any form of entrepreneurial stuff. I've spoken to a lot of folks through here who are in sort of a business to business kind of situation. The book is going to be helping them and whatnot. So that sort of situation is what I'm speaking to, because the other ones fall more into the fiction marketing, and I believe we're going to be doing another one on that a little bit later. So today I want to talk about this nonfiction, this how to help people. Could even be religious, spiritual. Spoken to a few of those folks as well. So it starts off with getting clarity on three very important things. And this is to the book, and this is also to the business. But the first question is who are you? And the reason you need to ask this question is, and it kind of comes off as maybe sounding a little selfish at first, but it's not. What it is, it's the clarity about where you want to take this book. What is it that you want to do? How, how are you going to help these people with this? What is your business? So what is your business? What does it do? What is it you're selling? What is the main thing specifically that you're selling? And is the book going to get the person from there to that? And then what is the purpose of this book in terms of your goals? So for example, most people in this space, when they use this book, the revenue is not coming from the book. Most times, and that's a mentality that has to be sort of embraced. The money comes from the things after the book. The book is simply what's called a low barrier to entry. Meaning if you want to communicate with someone, you want to have this conversation where it's, technically if it's a book, it's their voice reading to themselves in their head, you're going to develop this bond with them, and it's going to build a trust and an understanding and those sorts of things with them. And it's going to help them, it's going to help you move them through this. So what is your business? What is the main thing you're selling? And what is the purpose of the book in the context of your goals? And so those goals have to be very clearly defined. And you have to know what the purpose of this is, because what you do is you wrap this book in what's called a frame, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, because the frame, the only reason you do that is to move them down the path. So hopefully this is making sense. So the next piece in this, so we're still in part one, so it's who are you? And the second part is who do you serve? And this piece is ridiculously vital. What you need with this is you need to have a single entity that you're talking to. You probably heard the term thrown around called customer avatar kind of thing, and that's what this means. And quick story on this. So I'm working with a longtime friend of mine on this exact situation. And he has a book, he has a business and all those kinds of things. And his book was written for two diametrically opposed groups of people. So there was someone who was an employee who might be thinking about making the transition into becoming an entrepreneur. But he also was writing this for a situation where it was an entrepreneur who had been in there for a while and had become trapped in their business and was ready to make a pivot. It's like completely night and day, the conversations that were going on in this person's brain. And so there's the phrase I want you to remember: if you are not talking to one, you are talking to none. Your book has to talk to one person. And I see this all the time. It's, people are like, oh, well, this book will help everybody. I'm like, you know what? I'm sure it will. But there's an interesting psychological phenomenon that happens when your book excludes people, when it only focuses on the needs and the pain and how to solve the problem for a specific individual. And that is, it attracts so many more people. People you never would have thought in like a million years suddenly start going, oh my word. Like, I know this message is for this particular group of people, but it really resonates with me too. And more of those people come in. Now, if you want to better target other people, guess what you do? You write more books. But if you're not talking to one, you are talking to none, because that you have like 4 seconds to hook them with whatever you're doing in this. And so make sure that you are very narrowly focused. And so you create that avatar, that customer, and then what are their problems? And write those things out like on this continuum, because you're going to use those problems as conversations. And that's going to be used in the marketing. That's going to be used in your in the back end stuff with the other things that are going to go on in your book and whatnot. It's going to be used in everything. So you have to really identify with what that stuff is. And then the last piece here is, how do you serve them? So who are you? Who do you serve? And then how do you serve them? And how is this book going to basically solve their problems? And will this book lead them to the rest of your business? And that is a huge, huge piece that has been missing so far in the vast majority. I would literally say almost 100% of the conversations that I've had with most of the nonfiction authors is, what's the bigger picture? The focus here is not on the book. I mean, of course it is. Yes, you have to have a good book and all those things that go, editors and covers and all that kind of stuff. But you're building a tool that is eventually going to make you far more revenue than you probably could imagine at this particular point. So the next part about this is going to be, how do you identify the marketing message? That's a huge one. So hopefully those last questions kind of got you into the framework that you need to be very specific about your targeting this. Not just the people, but also the directionality of the message and what the point of the book is to get you through that into the other things. So this is really what we call the messaging and things like that. This is what we call framing in marketing, where what you're doing, it's literally kind of like painting. Because in this context, you're the artist and the reader is the one beholding this painting, and you have all of the tools available to you. You get to pick the landscape. You get to pick that picture that they see, and then you shove their head in it. And all of that stuff, you literally just wrap it in this frame that is, this is the conversation that these people are having in their minds, and this is how to move them to where you want to be. And you kind of wrap that in a story a little bit. So when you know who you're talking to, you know who this single person is, you can then better craft these stories that move them from one step to the next, and that the ultimate thing at the end is to get them into the next piece. And so usually that piece is going to be something to the effect of, subscribe. So the next piece about that is going to be, what are you doing to pull these people out of the book and into your ecosystem? And by your ecosystem, I'm talking about, is it your website? Do you want to do more of a Facebook thing? If you're a big fan of this live stuff, this is great for engagement. You can absolutely wrap a book in this kind of thing. And so if you aren't ready for this, if there's no back end here, if there's nothing else, if there's no lead capture on those kinds of situations, what's happening is you'll end up launching this book into whatever level you reach, but then ultimately it doesn't do anything for you. And this is one of the big problems with like major publishers and whatnot, is they typically don't allow their authors to do that, which is why I love this whole self-publishing thing. Is it allows you to put a call to action in the book that will then pull people out. But in order to do that, you have to have your messaging. You have to know the stories that they're going to tell. So that was a very short piece, but that's also very important. So the next part is going to be, where does the money live? And so we went over the questions: who are you? Who do you serve? How do you serve them? Who's your customer? What's your message? How are you moving them from where they are to where you want them to be? What is your tactic for getting them out of the book into some sort of, typically, and this is my preference because I built my entire business on it, but lead generation is kind of what every business owner needs out there. What is your lead generation? What is your reason for moving them through? And so in this particular part, what business are you really in? I've had a lot of folks who have come through who are like, hey, I have this book out and I'd like to see if you could run some AMS, the Amazon Marketing Service ads. And I'm like, why? What's the point? There's no back end thing. So is it even really worth marketing? And in most cases, my opinion on that is probably not, until you see the back end stuff. So what is your main product? Is it a webinar? What are you selling? That kind of thing. So if you're a dance instructor, I'm sure there's a book about dance out there somewhere. I just kind of made that up. But what is it you're selling? How are you moving people into this? Because you could very easily at that point say, all right, thank you so much for buying the book. Come over here to get this series of 6 videos that's going to show you how to do this, that, and the other thing. And it's actually not that tough. People are, oh, I'd love to see some videos, because you can't really embed video in a book. And it just makes perfect sense for that to be the next logical step. Another wonderful thing you could do is then, for people who have bought that book, give them a discount on whatever it is that you're selling on the back end. And it becomes almost effortless at that point. So yeah, that's just really the other thing to consider, is how you're moving them out of the book and how you're making that transition of these readers back into the world that is your business. For example, I've seen lots of people that are selling, a $7 book that leads into an $1,800, an $1,800 course. It's crazy. Or a lot of these marketing consultants and stuff will create these things. One of the best examples, someone's doing this recently, is Frank, a marketing guy named Frank Kern. He's used 3 books that he then runs like this, and he's doing about $600,000 a month in revenue. And that's great, more power to him. It's totally how that stuff works. But he's losing money on the books on the front end to build this list of extremely qualified subscribers. And then he has the back end to do that. And it's what I like to call a weaponized back end that turns these readers into bigger, more frequently paying customers. The main thrust here is, what do you need to know and what do you need to do before you hire some guy who's going to do marketing? What you don't need marketing yet. What you need is business development consulting, because the vast majority of authors that I've spoken to have not even considered most of this, let alone have any framework for what it takes to get into it. You need an autoresponder. I recommend a thing like leadpages.net, which does split testing so that you can optimize the pages. Like when we do these things, it's usually, we've taken them from like 9%, sometimes all up to 60%. That's in terms of traffic hitting that page and going from a click to an actual subscriber. And so if you think about what your cost per subscriber is versus 9% versus 60%, wow, it's huge. It's like night and day cost-wise. But that's one piece. How are you testing these things? What are you offering? Do you need to build an information product, like a how-to thing first? And the answer is no, you don't. There are ways that, and I think one of the things that makes people very frustrated when they hear a lot of these things is, it's so much work and I have to go back and do all these things. You can actually sell this stuff live and develop it live. Like there's a method that I've used a lot in the past where you sell a series of webinars on the back end, and you use the book sort of as that entry point, and you sort of push people through that, and then you just keep building this webinar sequence, and then you take those webinars, chop them up, turn them into a video course. Now you only need to do it, you do the work once, and you get paid forever. I was approached the other day by someone who was speaking to the aging baby boomers who, I'm trying to remember exactly what he said, who like to travel on luxury cruise lines. I'm like, and I asked, do you have a back-end business? He's like, no, I'm just going to make money selling these books. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to make a ton more money selling affiliate products on the back end, because all of those cruise lines will pay you to put butts in the seats. Why not do that? And so the first step is, who are you, who do you serve, how you serve them. You need to be very, very crystal clear on this, because if you kind of jam up here, you can kind of imagine it's gonna, it's gonna send you off into a really wonky kind of direction. So the second piece is identify your correct marketing message. Remember, if you're not talking to one, you're talking to none, and get that down. I know for a lot of folks, there's a psychological hurdle there because they feel like maybe they're going to, really get rid of too many people, and the exact opposite is true. You actually end up including more people when you push them away. It's almost like dating. It's weird how that works. And then number 3, what business are you really in? Where does your big money live? What is that stuff? What is your back end product? And then once you know what your plan is, once you have that, once you have worked with those situations, and okay, here's my framework, here's my process, here's my product, here's what I'm going to charge for it, and you go and get those customers. At that point, once you've tested it a little bit, now you're ready for someone to help market it. But if you haven't done this before, you need business development consulting and something, and to bring somebody in who has seen this, who has done this, and who can get you from point A to point B. A perfect example of this, because the problem is, and I had the same problem when I was first starting out. It took years for me to get traction. And finally, once I did, I was like, oh my word, why didn't I do this sooner? But a great example of this is a guy named John Lee Dumas. You probably heard of him. He's the fellow from Entrepreneur on Fire. He's the guy that started that thing. He came out of the military, had a little bit of money saved up because I believe he was overseas for a long time, didn't have any way to spend it. And he was like, I want to get into this podcasting thing. And what did he do? Hired a business development consultant who knew the lay of the land, and now he's doing about $240,000 a month. So, and he literally hit the ground running, and within a year was one of the biggest podcasts for entrepreneurs in the world. Came up with his own unique format and is just absolutely killing it. Because what that does is it helps you compress time. That's the same concept behind why you hire a marketing professional, is it compresses time. It takes, maybe you don't know how to do Facebook ads, so you bring in someone who does. That's logical and it makes sense. When it comes to your business as a whole, if what I'm telling you is like, then that would make logical sense, because instead of taking years to figure it out, what ends up typically happening at that point, and this is what I'm trying to help a lot of people avoid, is like, well, I don't know about all that because it's new to me, but I have this book. And then they go to launch it, and it does what it does. It sells maybe 50 or 500 copies or whatever it is. And then, you don't make your money back. And then it's kind of like pain and suffering because, oh shoot, the market, it didn't work. This book thing doesn't work. It didn't help me at all. Well, it didn't help you because the infrastructure wasn't set up. Because it's almost just as vital as writing your book. So there you go. That's what you need to know before you hire a marketing professional. I'm hoping this was clear, is that you have to look at what business you're really in and what that book means. And then above all else, make sure it is talking to that one person who is your ideal client. And that, my good people, is all I have today. So thank you so much for coming. Like I said, please share this so that the replay can help some folks out, all right? I am Jonny Andrews. You are you people, and you're awesome. And thank you so much. This was absolutely a pleasure to be with you. I will see you around shortly.